Get unready with me while I tell you about Dmitry Mendeleev and the nap that changed the course of scientific history forever. Have you ever been told a good night's sleep can help solve an issue you're having or working on? Or if not, you've definitely had an assignment that on first slip seems impossible, but after coming back a few days later seems much more approachable. Well, it turns out there's a real science to back it up. As we sleep, our prefrontal cortex shuts down, and as we enter REM sleep, the neuromodulator serotonin is turned off. And as a side effect, our rational thinking and impulse control is suppressed, allowing for our brain to do its nighttime job of finding connections. A concept T.S. Eliot called idea incubation. Perhaps one of the most famous instances of this occurring is with the father of the periodic table and periodicity, Dmitry Ivanovich Mendeleev. Born on the 8th of February 1834 in Siberia, Dr. Mendeleev is a famed Russian chemist renowned for having created the foundation for our version of the periodic table and creating periodic law, allowing him to predict the properties of elements that hadn't even been discovered yet. Born to a family of theologists and teachers, Mendeleev was encouraged to patiently search divine and scientific truth, a sentiment that apparently followed him into his adulthood. Being the youngest of 17 siblings, his family struggled financially, and after his father's death and mother's glass factory burnt to the ground, Dmitry began his education. Dmitry and his mother embarked on an almost 1,000-mile journey to Moscow to apply to the University of Moscow where his father had studied, where he unfortunately wasn't accepted. Makes my hour-long commute seem, almost pleasant. But his mother, so dedicated to seeing Dmitry well educated, walked to St. Petersburg, where he was accepted into the Institute of Pedagogy with a full ride scholarship. In 1865, he became a Doctor of Science and began to teach inorganic chemistry, discovered periodicity, and transformed St. Petersburg into an internationally recognized center for chemistry research. To make a long story short, the guy's a genius. But why is periodicity and the periodic table so important to us as chemists and material scientists? Well, to answer that, we need to explore its history. I'm going to go wash my face now. From as early as 1829, scientists such as Johann Dobereiner and John Newlands had realised that certain elements shared similar properties and therefore could be grouped on the basis of these properties. Dobereiner separated them into groups of threes and dubbed it the model of triads, while Newlands created a more sophisticated and more recognisable model called the law of octaves, where properties seem to repeat themselves every 8 elements. I wonder why. For months, Mendeleev and his colleagues further developed these ideas with the creation of their own version of the game of patience, where each of the 56 known elements, their properties and their behaviours were written out on their own playing card. These were then shuffled and rearranged periodically by every parameter they could come up with. So one night, after 3 straight days of working on the problem, in a moment of inspiration, Mendeleev decided to arrange the elements by their atomic weight, and then, perhaps in his most relatable move, fell asleep while working. Upon waking, he sketched the vision from his dream, realising the relationship between atomic weight and periodicity. He then organised the elements into a table based on their atomic weights and valence in the structure that we're so familiar with. The elements aligned in the same column share the same similar properties and are known as groups, and elements that share the same row are known as periods and have the same highest unexcited electron energy levels. All this information and more is packed into one universal reference table that graces the walls of classrooms and laboratories around the world. As he reviewed his work, he realised that gaps existed, predicting the existence of elements that had yet to be discovered. He boldly proclaimed that these elements would be found and that they would fit perfectly into his table, which we now know to be true as these have been identified as gallium and germanium. Mendeleev later described his dream as seeing a table where all the elements fell into place as required. But back to my original question. Why is this discovery so important to modern chemists over 150 years after Mendeleev published his proposed model? While we've covered the obvious answers, in which the table organises the elements and lets us predict undiscovered ones, these patterns in reactivity, ionisation energy, electronegativity and atomic radius helps guide scientists and engineers in the synthesis of new compounds and materials by providing insights into the possible combinations and reactions between these elements. And with that, I think I'm finally ready for bed. Here's fingers crossed to my dissertation coming to me tonight.